Boom. We're live, ladies and gentlemen. This is going to be a little bit of a different show, so just right off the get-go, not professional or medical advice. Strictly for speculation and historic use only. We're going to be talking about the coronavirus and some of the information that we've been finding. We've been watching this since day one. So again, I'm just a speculator. That's what we do most of the time. So today, I think for safety reasons and because it's better to be proactive instead of reactive, taking a look at some of the stuff we found and think that is important about these particular situations. So with that in mind, let's dive right in. Okay, so we're going to start here on the Johns Hopkins University data center. So I've been watching this since January. What is it? It was like 21st or something. I'm not proud of that, but I had actually just been traveling through China from Indonesia back to Canada on the 15th of January. So actually just on the curve of this wave. And I was fascinated and still am. So I know first off, what I want to do is start off by saying heart goes out to any families that are affected by the death of loved ones. My interest in this space is purely scientific and for the hypothetical and real life implications of what's taking place here. So I wonder if my internet's just going atrociously slow right now. There's actually was looking at this one anyways. So this one's called WuFlu.live. It's a lighter version. And actually, I like the statistics stack better. It's a little easier to see. And let's start off taking a look at these numbers, right? So when we first started seeing the first few hundred numbers, I actually, started to get worried. There are some very real world not things to be scared about, but just from a scientific point of view, it's I know I don't want to be excited about this because I know that people's lives are always at stake, but there's some very interesting statistical data points that we get here, and it's like a real live video game. I know it sounds so bad. Anyways, it grabbed my attention very quickly. So since back here around the 21st of January when they first put these websites online, we started watching, and this exponential growth curve here, so not exponential, but this quadratic growth curve here is actually a really interesting one. So I want to give a shout out to Peak Prosperity, which is another great site, and they had shared this mainland China reporter confirmed cases graph. And what they've done here is they've actually just mapped out a quadratic, which is a mathematical equation. And what we're seeing from China right now is statistical data that to within, I think, a 99th percentile of accuracy, they're hitting this exact quadratic function, which basically means the data that we're getting from China is obviously spoofed. And we kind of figured that to begin with. So even though we see a drop off in the last few days of the data of how many different people are being affected, we're still following that quadratic. So it's not, we can likely expect that there is some type of exponential growth curve. Now, I think the media has done a fairly bad job of explaining the real problems with some of this, comparing it to the flu. Again, remember, right now we know that we, on average, we lose 10 to 20,000 people per year for flu, and a few million people get infected, and that's seasonal. When it gets colder, people are more susceptible, their immune systems are down. So understanding the fact that with the novel coronavirus, we don't necessarily know how it functions. We don't know if the seasonal changes will actually affect this particular virus. We're used to the flu. We've had it in our kind of herd group mainstream for quite some time, and a lot of us have been able to adapt and have antibodies. We meet that flu again a few years later. So I think it's important to remember that what's different about this is the basically the RNA, which is the functioning, it's like a DNA, but it's a single strand version of DNA. It's not a double helix. So we're really battling something that has its own genetic makeup and structure to basically infect people. That's how the virus creates and promulgates itself. It's maybe been able to make it through multiple different animals to get to this point. This is what's called a zoonotic virus. So I'm going to take a look at some other really cool charts here. So again, shout out to Peak Prosperity. They've actually written some of this stuff down. I could have written it down, but I figured I'd just save some time and give them a shout out. Again, just if we're comparing the novel coronavirus on statistical data that we have so far, which again is flawed, we do have to remember that over time, the exact information is going to become a lot clearer. We can't necessarily trust China. We do have a perfect scientific study which is taking place on these cruise ships right now because they're locked, quarantined environments, and we get to find out how easily and transmissible these viruses are, right? So first off, you have what's called the R0 or the R0, however you want to look at it, and that's basically the infect rate of the virus itself. So with the flu, it's every 1.28 people. So essentially for every person that you meet, and them n.28 of another person gets infected, right? So throughout your day, throughout the course of having the flu, because you've been staying inside because you're sick, 1.28 other people get that virus. With the novel coronavirus, again, we're seeing numbers between 2.5 and 4.8. You have the Lancet, which is a very well-established journal, as well as the New England Journal of Medicine. Actually, these are two great sites where they take a look at some of this more specific data as it comes to life. Again, so what you see here is on the New England Journal. And I'm sorry for jumping around here. Basically what today is I just want to kind of organize my thoughts and share the fact that I think this is important. And I'm likely going to include an update in these areas because this is going to have a massive effect on the markets. The fact that we see green right now just means that there's money printing. We have some of the biggest places in China on lockdown, and they are the hub and center of a lot of the parts that get created for other vehicles, whether it's plane, trains, automobiles, jets, submarines, all sorts of crazy modes of transportation is moved around by basically some of these big building centers of China. So there are going to be disruptions. So understanding not just the economic impact, but the personal impact here is something that is, I think, deeply important. And again, for my own fascination, it's because of the scientific data that's behind this. So right now what we're looking at, this is a nice little write-up, and I don't want to jump too far off here. You can go to the New England Journal of Medicine. I'll leave these links in the coming videos so you can do all your own homework if you would like. Again, I just like the scientific basis for this stuff and the fact that it is a real world issue right now that's evolving on a day-to-day basis. I think it's important to stay well educated and assertive, so to be able to be proactive instead of reactive, so to recognize these things before they become a potential problem. So you can check out the New England Journal of Medicine and the Lancet, and this is where we're getting this data from of the R0. So right now, seeing an R0 of potentially even 2.5, it means it's significantly more viral than the flu, which means the potential of a pandemic, which I do believe most scientists agree we are already in a pandemic state. Again, the rough definition is that it is just an ongoing epidemic on multiple continents, and we do see that. So this is important data to pay attention to. Again, the other statistical outliers are the fact that we're seeing anywhere between a 2 to 3%, and I have seen data that goes all the way up to 11% for fatality rates. Although I guess if we want to get into this, there is a lot of evidence for asymptomatic transmission, which means that you can give the virus to someone without even knowing that you have it, because the symptoms are weak to minimal. You could just feel like, oh, I was just tired that day. Again, so you're looking at a 3% fatality rate from the novel coronavirus and 0.1% on flu. Again, and with such big numbers from the flu, this could be a much bigger deal. And this is what concerns me, is that the mainstream media is downplaying these numbers that we see coming directly from peer-reviewed mainstream media, right? So there's a few different places you can find, like, again, the Lancet, these are peer-reviewed papers, New England Journal of Medicine. You can find other ones like here, this MEVDRIV. This is non-peer-reviewed literature. This is literature that's just being created on the fly. It usually takes a few days. You could probably double check to see who these authors are. I haven't yet, but this is a different, just early stage prediction parameters, blah, blah. Just reading some random stuff. But the point of this that I really want to highlight again is that this information is important, whether it helps you save your life or not. I think is regardless, but we definitely know that China is not the most forthcoming when it comes to data and sharing information. So the stuff that we're getting out now, which is, again, because you see an infection rate in places like Japan. Japan just took 86. And what's really interesting too is you see the political aspects of this here as well. Okay, so we'll look at the Johns Hopkins and we'll I should close that so it doesn't ding anymore. Hey, there we go. Okay. So this live stream, the purpose of this is I just kind of want to round out my thoughts before I make more videos. And I decided something just should come out anyways, regardless if it was polished or well put together. More of a sketch pad, and the reason for doing the video is just for me to say, hey, I think this is important. Keep an eye on it. Be assertive, not reactive in these situations, because the numbers that we're seeing here, again, this is very likely weak. I would almost stipulate, and we've seen other way more professional people say this already, that this is a pandemic and it is likely ongoing. So the numbers and the time, the infection rates, having such a high virility, or what's called an R naught, is extremely concerning, to say that. Yeah. Again, we just don't know yet, and I think that's one of the more concerning parts. So you can see the political aspects of this as well. Here you see 61 others in the top left-hand corner. This is actually because of the 61 people that are on the cruise ship. So Japan doesn't even want to take that on as of the political responsibility. Like, they have to. Most likely the cruise ship actually does in partnership with Japan. But Japan didn't take that number on, whereas when you come to Wu flu here, again, Japan has actually taken on those extra 61 people and now sits above Singapore by multiple times. And again, all these countries are going to be basically battling for not taking the economic brunt and downfall that's going to come from this inevitably. Again, China, I can't imagine if you jump on Twitter. Twitter's a really interesting place, but you try to figure out what's actually going on over there, and you see all these kind of disturbing videos. Okay, like, I don't know if I can play this. It doesn't matter if we get here. This, like, people getting dragged through, put into quarantine. These are not good images coming. The ones that we do get, how briefly they stay up before they get basically wiped from the internet. There's from day one, these videos you find them on Reddit, or you used to be able to find them on Twitter, and then they're gone. You see them on YouTube, and then they're gone. So people are putting their lives at risk to share content to let other people in China, most likely. These are generally getting leaked from places like WeChat and WhatsApp. Okay, no, I think it's just WeChat. Excuse me. So again, the importance and the concerning aspects here is that we know that China isn't forthcoming with their information. So now that we do have more reliable data coming from places like the cruise ship and the New England Journal of Medicine, we do still find these outrageous R naught numbers, which means, again, it's very likely that you can give the virus to other people. The fatality rate is significantly higher. This is 30 times higher than the flu, right? So it's notably important. I mean, again, getting stressed out isn't going to do you any good here, but again, recognizing that this is much worse than the flu, I think, is extremely important. And then the other concerning part is that people seem to get serious complications around 20% of the time. They seem fine for the first 7 days, and then all of a sudden, bam, they get super sick. And you can see this in some of the the New England Journal of Medicine's this graph here shows you basically, okay, here's when they felt sick. Subjective fever basically means like, yeah, I think I felt kind of hot. They were tired, obviously, and then I think hospital day one, yeah. So 4 or 5 days into feeling sick, they finally get to the hospital, and they have this extended period of fairly critical care for the next 7 days in this one. And this was I think this particular one was a younger gentleman, so he recovered within a shorter time frame. But you take a look at, let's say, Li Wenliang, the person who one of the doctors who originally was given basically told not to talk about the virus during the very, very early days of the outbreak, before it was definitely at the scale that it's at now. And he passed away after 20-something days in the hospital. So you see these big lag times and common